I'll explain a little bit about that in a moment. Our legal counsel and our legislative committee. Oops. So the makeup of our board of directors, we have 16 board members, and they're elected by the membership on an annual basis, 8 each year. There's a very diverse representation. There's 4 from each of the 4 regions, and there is a city, a county, a special district, and a public member representing all 4 regions. Your LAFCO, since 1988, has actually had 5 commissioners serve on the Cal-LAFCO board, equaling 22 years of service. So it's really to be acknowledged and honored. 22 years of service on the Cal-LAFCO board since 1988 is actually a pretty big deal. And most recently, Commissioner Welt served on the board for 2 years. So we were very grateful. I was very honored to work with you, Commissioner Welt. I mentioned some staff. Cal-LAFCO does not have any employer-employee relationship. We instead do all of our work through contract. So the executive director, myself, actually has a contract with the association for a 24-hour-a-week work week. We have an executive assistant. She works about 10 to 15 hours a week. We have legal counsel as needed, and we have a CPA that provides us on contract about 15 hours a quarter. So the reality of the executive director is that it's not a 24-hour-a-week job. And so, as you may be aware, the Cal-LAFCO board recently, after 6 or 7 months of very in-depth investigation and conversation, decided that we needed to sort of reorganize the supporting infrastructure of the organization. And as such, effective January 1st, they will take the executive director role to 32 hours a week or 4 days a week to better meet the needs of the association. I mentioned that we rely extensively on volunteer staff. We still do, although we are trying very hard to move away from that reliance as much as possible. What we are finding is that we are experiencing donor fatigue, which is what happens when you have a 501c3 and you're constantly relying on donors. And so we're sort of burning out those member LAFCOs that continually volunteer to do things for the association. We do have 1 executive officer and 3 deputy executive officers that assist me in supporting the organization. There's 1 from each region. The legislative committee and the board of directors are all volunteers. So Cal-LAFCO does not pay them for the work that they do. We do, however, pay a stipend to the LAFCO of the executive officer and the deputy executive officers. We use a lot of their time. There's some travel involved to board meetings, to the staff workshop, to the annual conference, and so we do compensate their LAFCO for that. We have the vice chair of the legislative committee, and all of the members of the legislative committee are volunteer, that include both board members and LAFCO staff. As a matter of fact, while your LAFCO has not directly had staff volunteer, your current executive officer did serve as Cal-LAFCO deputy executive officer and executive officer from 2006 to 2009. And your LAFCO has had a presence on the legislative committee for years, both with your former executive officer and now with your current executive officer. We rely, up until next year actually, we rely on our LAFCOs to volunteer as hosts for our annual conference and our staff workshop. As I said, and as you know, we're coming to Santa Barbara next year for the annual conference, and it will be the last time that a local LAFCO is officially hosting the conference. I mentioned we were experiencing donor fatigue. This is a substantial area where that is occurring. And so we were having a difficulty with LAFCOs raising their hand saying, yes, we will agree to take on all that is required of us as a host LAFCO. And so starting in 2017, Cal LAFCO will assume all of the responsibilities of the host. And we have chosen select locations, so there'll be a set rotation. Every 3 years, every 4 years, we'll know exactly where we will go. And the fourth year will be a voluntary rotation. So, for example, this year we were in Sacramento. So in 2019, we'll be back in Sacramento, and every 4 years thereafter. In 2016, it's actually Santa Barbara, and then every 4 years, so in 2020 and every 4 years thereafter, we'll be up for anywhere. The following year, 2017, and every 4 years thereafter will be in San Diego and then in Monterey. So that was another substantial change that the organization made this year. So we're happy to say that there'll be a lot of firsts and several lasts at this next annual conference, and the good news is that you're a part of all of that. We have Cal LAFCO University courses, and the folks that sit on the panels for those as well as plan them are all volunteer. Any special projects that we do are all volunteer, as well as the support for all of the committees that the board sits on. Cal LAFCO does have extensive operational policies and procedures that we created originally in 2007 and we update annually. And we are I'm very proud to say that we have very stringent fiscal policies, and we are in full compliance with all 990 requirements, which in all honesty was not the way it always has been with our organization. When my predecessor came on board with Cal LAFCO, he and the CPA did a stellar job in bringing us in full compliance, and I'm very proud to say that over the years we have gained great financial stability. So we're very proud of that. Speaking of finances, I wanted to very briefly share with you the finances for the 2015-16 fiscal year. As you can see, a lot of our income is derived from member dues, and our second biggest piece of revenue is our annual conference. We have a large carryover. We are very fiscally prudent, and so this year in particular, we have a very large carryover from last year in the almost $77,000. We have $32,000 in anticipated revenue for our staff workshop, as well as $2,500 in anticipated revenue for Cal LAFCO University courses, $4,000, and then $2,500 in other miscellaneous revenues. Expenses, we have the largest chunk of $166,000+ in professional services, followed by $113,000 in conference revenue, and expenses, and the rest of it it breaks down there. I don't, unless you want me to read it all to you, I think you can see it there. Again, we have a substantial contingency fund this year in the amount of $41,983. And we are using a lot of that, as well as the carryover, in reinvesting it in a number of projects. The first is we are completely revising our website to make it more user-friendly, more accessible, to increase the stability of the platform, as well as the security of the platform. So we'll be reinvesting a lot of that into the website. We are reinvesting it in the form of supporting the additional infrastructure that's being put in place effective January 1, as well as looking at some additional white papers. So every 2 years, the board meets in an all-day strategic planning retreat. and they did in January 2015. And they reaffirmed their strategic plan and their policy and legislative priorities. And so their policies and legislative priorities, as they relate to and impact the mission of LAFCOs, are a LAFCO purpose and authority and preserving that. Preserving and protecting ag and open space, paying close attention to water availability, and the viability of local services. The issues of interest as they relate to and impact orderly growth, sprawl, and local services remain housing, transportation, flood control, and adequate municipal services in inhabited territories. So I won't read all of these to you because you have them in your packet, but the board focuses on 6 strategic areas, and each one of those primary strategic areas has a detailed action plan and objectives tied with them. And in the past, the organization every 2 years has created this strategic plan, and we revisit it only every 2 years. I'm very happy to say that this year the board took a long, hard look at where we wanted the organization to be in the future. And this year's strategic plan is actually quite aggressive. And in January, when they meet, they will get a dashboard, performance evaluation, if you will, from the organization on how well we did in terms of that strategic plan. So it will allow them to really look at, these are the goals and objectives that we created as an organization for ourselves, as a board, and how did we actually do with that. We will be reporting all of that to all of you after the board meets in January on that. I mentioned that we made some substantial changes this year, which were shared with the membership in terms of a letter and then at our annual membership meeting in October. And those include the conference hosting model. They include the volunteer and contracted staff. And the other big change that they made in terms of the conference is, for the first time in 2016, we have contracted with a firm that will help us generate additional sponsorships. So we will be taking a very close look at the sponsorship model that we have today and how that can be improved to create greater benefit not only for the organization but for the people that choose to sponsor a Cal LAFCO conference. And we'll be talking maybe a little bit more about that in the next presentation. So with respect to member services, we do have an annual conference, and as I mentioned, we'll be here next year and then in San Diego 2017. We do have an annual staff workshop that's usually in the spring. We'll be in the southern region in Universal City in March of next year and in Fresno in 2017. We do hold 2 Cal LAFCO University courses a year, one in the south and one in the north, and those are topic-based, so we take whatever is hot at the moment. Last month, we did one on the implementation of SB 88, which was the budget trailer bill passed that gives the State Water Resources Control Board the authority to mandate the consolidation of water systems. So a huge thing for LAFCOs, and so that was a very well-attended session. We also do research papers. Other member services we offer, as I mentioned, we have a website, and we're in the process of revising that completely. Takes a lot of hits in terms of visitors. We run 8 listservs, 1 for each region, and then our executive officers have their own, the legal counsel has their own, the clerks have their own, and the analysts have their own. And I would say that the 2 that are the most active are the legal counsel and the executive officers. And it's a way for them to poll their peers on information so they don't have to reinvent the wheel. If they're an executive officer is dealing with a particular situation that they know their colleagues might have some insight on, then they get the information to share it through the listserv. We also do an annual report through the Sphere, which is our annual magazine, and provide quarterly reports after each board meeting. We generate a quarterly report that is shared with all of the executive officers and all of the members through all of those listservs, and I'm confident that it is shared with all of you as well. And we have publications. I mentioned that we act as a legislative resource for our members. This is an important note to point out that not many of our members are aware of. Because we are a 501c3, we are not an official lobbying organization. That's a different designation. And so as such, I am not a registered lobbyist. And so to legally protect our 501c3 status, I am limited to a maximum of 20% of my contract time to do lobbying efforts. And so we run a very limited legislative platform. We're very conscious of the amount of time that I am able to spend doing that kind of lobbying. And this coming Friday, we have a legislative meeting, and the legislative committee has some pretty difficult decisions to make in terms of prioritizing our very full legislative platform. And the board just went through that extensive conversation last month. So as a legislative resource, I propose and review LAFCO legislation. We sponsor legislation. I review every bill that's introduced to see if it affects LAFCOs or not. I testify at hearings at the Capitol, serve on working groups, and coordinate with peer associations. We are also a resource not only to our members, but to also the public. And with that, I want to take a moment to thank you again on behalf of Cal LAFCO and the entire Board of Directors for the strong partnership and support that your LAFCO has provided Cal LAFCO through the years. I also want to acknowledge your LAFCO that you have also received a number of achievement awards through the years. Just to remind you, in 2001, you received a Project of the Year award. In 2009, your current executive officer received the Mike Gotch Courage and Innovation in Local Government Leadership Award. And because once was not enough, in 2002, he received the Outstanding LAFCO Professional Award. And then in 2010, your executive officer at the time also received the Distinguished Service Award. So it's a privilege for us to be able to acknowledge the good work of not only your staff, but your LAFCO. And speaking of the good work of your staff, I think I don't need to tell you what a strong staff you have, not only in your executive officer, but in all of your administrative support as well. So it's my pleasure to be able to work with them. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Well, thank you very much for that presentation, Ms. Miller. I think that it seems like Santa Barbara LAFCO has always had a very strong relationship with Cal LAFCO. Certainly since I've been on LAFCO, very involved in legislative issues. I always look forward to the annual conferences. We always have great participation, I think, from our members going. And certainly, again, Commissioner Welts just recently serving on the board, and now going to be very proud to host the annual conference. So, Commissioner Welts, you have your light on.
Pamela, I'm so grateful that you're here to give this presentation to us, and I want to throw it right back to you. The state of California and Cal LAFCO is very, very fortunate to have you as a leader. You are a wonderful public servant, and thank you very much for everything that you do for Cal LAFCO. Good job.
Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Commissioner O'Rourke?
just in giving accolades to Santa Barbara County as a whole, Bill Chiat, your predecessor, happened to work for the county of Santa Barbara a few years ago too. So it was grassroots as far as LAFCO and I think employees too. Very good job.
And I had the privilege, actually, of working with Bill at the County of Napa. Our paths crossed. He was the county administrator when I was hired at the county. So, yes, you're right. Thank you for bringing it.
Commissioner Stark?
Yes, I actually have a couple of questions. I'm new, as you may have figured out. As to the LAFCO U,
Yes.
I'm not going to ask you what their nickname is.
University.
Maybe the,
LAFCO University.
yeah, do they have a mascot like the Border Collies or something? Am I correct? You have actually classes? It's not an online thing?
That's correct. It's in person.
Okay, so you could sign up for the classes, but you can't like flick on a videotape or something?
We do not have that capability yet, no.
Okay. And a similar question has to do with the listservs.
Yes.
How does one establish eligibility to be on any particular listserv?
Great question. So the 4 listservs that serve LAFCO staff, as I mentioned, are the executive officer, and you need to be an executive officer or an assistant executive officer for that, the clerks, the analysts, and the legal counsel. The legal counsel is dedicated strictly to legal counsel only, for obvious legal reasons. The other 4 are regional listservs, and those are not used very often, but who is on those are the executive officers for each of the LAFCOs in that particular region, as well as the 4 board members for that region.
Okay, so if I have a question, I'm interested in the views, I should go through Bill or Paul and they would get on the appropriate listserv rather than me trying to do it directly?
Yes.
Okay, that's what I
Or
want to
you can ask, or you can come to me directly as well.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Go Border
Other
Collies.
questions? Commissioner Seves, and then Commissioner Morehouse.
An operational question. You mentioned that your time is limited for lobbying purposes because of the 501c3. Has there been discussion to have a separate entity to do lobbying? Because as bills move through, it's going to take more than 20% of your time.
Great question, and one that actually comes up just about every presentation. So yes, the board, actually, when they hired my predecessor, had that conversation, and then when they hired me, they had that conversation, and then just recently had the conversation again. The reason that the board has consistently chosen to not have a lobbyist, and we actually used to have a lobbyist, when the executive director position or responsibilities were rotated around the state with executive officers, and we were truly reliant on all of our member LAFCOs to do the work of the association. We had a lobbyist who would do that work. Many years ago, the organization transitioned away from that and has chosen to stay away from that because not being a lobbying organization, interestingly enough, allows us a seat at the table for discussions that many other lobbying organizations, our sister peer associations, don't get that opportunity. We are viewed as, particularly given the nature of the makeup of a LAFCO commission, we're viewed as a very neutral party in conversations around legislation. And so by having a lobbyist, it changes that dynamic.
Thank you. Commissioner Morehouse?
Well, I guess my question was kind of down that line, too. You just beat me to the punch. And I don't know if I'm sold on that theory right now, because I do believe that LAFCOs across the state do need a lobbying entity. And I think it seems to me that you're really walking a real fine line between being a legitimate lobbyist versus not. I mean, the 20%, it's a hard thing to prove, I guess, at times.
There's also a difference between direct lobbying and legislative education. It may sound like a fine line, but there is a distinct difference between the two.
Yeah, I just don't know if it works from what I've seen so far. I think sometimes we do need a direct lobbyist, and we've had an issue here, actually a few times. We had 2 years in a row of assembly bills that, our cries, to Sacramento went unanswered. So something to learn from. Maybe we take a look at that in the future. And it just seems odd that you would be a 501c3 in Sacramento.
Thank you, Commissioner Morehouse. Other questions, comments? Any from Commissioner Wolf, Commissioner Guyer?
I'm not sure if no, we have no comments other than to thank her for being here. This was a very good presentation.
Thank you. Yes, I totally agree. So this is a receive and file. I think we'll consider it received and filed and welcomed. And we'll go ahead and move on to the next report, which has to do with the annual conference. So Ms. Miller, I know you want to provide us with information there, as well as Mr. Hood, perhaps. So go ahead.
Let me start out, and then Pamela can chime in. What's going on here? It's upside down. Having problems with PowerPoints. This was upside down, so yeah, I did. I'm feeling it today, so. And I'll make the font bigger next time. I just wanted to give you a brief report on the Cal LAFCO annual conference that's coming up in October of 2016. And we had a chance, just cut right to the chase, we had a chance yesterday, Ms. Miller and Mike Allen and Jacqueline Alexander, to meet with the hotel staff. And it was I thought, a very informative and productive time that we spent. We spent probably an hour and a half to 2 hours with the staff looking at all of the meeting facilities, all of the breakout sessions, the special events, locations. We even looked at the guest rooms, and we were amazed, frankly, that we got such an excellent rate on the per night. The 165 to 175 per night is very, very good for the Fess Parker Doubletree. But I also wanted to talk to you a little bit more about and Pamela can talk about that again, but let me go through a couple of areas that I wanted to stress again. I went through this last month, but we do need to come up with a conference theme, and we had some discussion yesterday at the Fess Parker about what we should look at as a theme, and I've identified since 2011 the themes of the annual conferences. We do need a logo, because the Save the Date flyer that was distributed in Sacramento last month, a couple of months ago, had a spot right on the very front of it for the Santa Barbara LAFCO logo, and it's just begging to be filled in with a logo. We again talked about the mobile workshop and special events. I know that we have some thoughts about that, and sponsorships. It's going to be critical to get some sponsorships, and we need to get some local sponsorships. So, Pamela, do you have anything you might want to add to that?
So I'd like to start by, Paul had mentioned the spectacular rate that we were able to get at the hotel, and I want to acknowledge and thank your commission and anybody else who was involved when the request for assistance came about when when Cal LAFCO was negotiating the contract with the hotel. We did not get that rate without your help and actually your intervention. So I just want to acknowledge and thank you very much for that. The facility is absolutely spectacular, and there's already chatter amongst the members about wanting to come back to Santa Barbara, and in particular that facility. So having viewed the place yesterday and had the privilege of staying there last night, I just am really looking forward to planning the event and seeing a hugely successful conference. The program planning committee has been put together, and that first call is next Tuesday. And want to thank Commissioners Morehouse and Welt for agreeing to participate on that committee. Very much appreciate that. And your staff will also be on that planning committee. We will be looking to the theme as a way to build the program around a theme, and we will distribute a request for proposals for session presenters after we have that theme. And I think that's, I'll touch briefly on sponsorships. I did mention earlier that for the first time we did hire a firm to help us solicit sponsorships. And in the past, we've had a cap on the dollar amount of sponsorships that we would accept, and we've made some internal changes that would allow us to not have a cap and would remind you that as elected officials, should you make the request, there would be a cap in place in terms of FPPC paperwork. So we typically, LAFCO, has typically relied on our associate members. So we will solicit sponsorships from our associate members and have traditionally asked the host LAFCO to look at any local potential sponsors. This time, we will still be asking you to look at local potential sponsors, but to provide us with all of that information so that we could make the ask. So again, we would be asking you to think about who locally you might know that may be interested in a sponsorship. You don't need to answer that now, but just to think about it. And I think that's all I wanted to say about that, Paul.
And we had also, Pamela, talked about having special events and mobile workshops. And a couple of things have been suggested. I know Commissioner Morehouse has some suggestions, but we also were brainstorming yesterday at the hotel and thinking about special site visits. And the Santa Barbara desal plant came up. It's located fairly close to the hotel. And so we're looking into, maybe going and taking a look at some innovations in supplying water and generating water from the ocean. And that desal plant is coming online. So that's one suggestion that came up. And I think it'd be of interest to LAFCO statewide. And then some other possibilities. I know Jeff, Commissioner Morehouse, had some suggestions, and also for the reception on Wednesday night. And we looked at some really nice areas that are in the hotel that are just perfect for a reception, and areas that are perfect for banquets as well. Mm-hmm. And so the Thursday night banquet. And so those are just a couple of things that we were thinking about. But the theme is still something that we need to think about and define fairly soon.
Okay. Commissioners Morehouse, those of you who have been talking about it, did you have any thoughts about a theme? Had any of that been discussed, either you or?
We haven't actually got together and talked about it. I know we made some comments at the last meeting where we would like to take some recommendations on a theme that's Santa Barbara would be highlighting the diversity of Santa Barbara and the diverse industries, the diverse agriculture, the diverse land uses. I mean, we have, of all the counties we go to through the state of California, we're one of the tops for the amount of diversity we have as far as everything that we do in Santa Barbara County. So kind of coming up with some type of theme around that, I think would be appropriate and really highlight the county. We have, north and south, North County, South County. We're all one county, and we all have some really special uses. So something that incorporates everybody.
Okay, Commissioner Seves?
You know, one thing to consider is the history of Santa Barbara. And, you know, lately I've been really involved in that because my wife traced her family back 300 years, and I'm looking at all these people that have come and gone and where they're buried. But, you know, if you look at the hotel itself, the rotunda used to be a roundabout for the train stations. And the trains would come into Santa Barbara and they'd turn around and leave from that area. So something about history and talk about maybe something with a train theme, I don't know. But history is big because you have a lot of organizations in Santa Barbara that take you on history tours. You can go to the Historical Trust or the museum, the Maritime Museum. There's a lot of things close by.
There are. You know, I just wondered, since it's at the end of October, and because agriculture is the biggest economic driver in Santa Barbara County, and of course the wine industry is a big part of that. A lot of times we have themes around celebration of harvest, you know, the gathering in, and so I'm just wondering if there's a way to, you know, think about something like that, you know, gathering together or.
Yeah, the conference is right around the time of both the Lemon Festival and also the California Avocado Festival in Carpinteria. So there's two areas that celebrate part of the history of this region. But again, that's South Coast, you know, as opposed to North. But and as far as a mobile workshop goes, or a tour, however we do it, are we gonna be limited to, you know, just one place, or can we do multiple workshops, give people an opportunity to see some stuff?
Well, something, although it's not in my districts, maybe Commissioner Lavanino wants to weigh in. Maybe it is in my district, can't be sure. But there's an enormous greenhouse operation that is not, I mean, I have seen some of the greenhouse operations in Carpinteria, but this is not like anything I have ever seen before. And the name, and that company's name, Windset Farms. I mean, I think that might be a possibility. I might be interested in it to see what they do there and how they're changing the face of agriculture and in that way, which also uses less water, less pesticides, herbicides, and all of that. I think we're talking about unique experiences. I think that the desal plant is definitely one, and something like this, you know, might be another. You know, Commissioner Lavanino?
Sure, they love showing off the place, and it is not like just walking through a greenhouse. This is like total automation. It's probably something that's not really being done anywhere else in the United States. So it would definitely be an eye-opener for people to see, and it's huge. I mean, you could definitely fit a lot of people, and I can contact them, as you know, and see if they'd be interested, but they're always willing to show it off.
Okay.
But it would be
Well-
definitely a half-day thing, because it would take some time to get there and then get back to Santa Barbara again. Of course, you know, we could always do some of the history along the way, too. I mean, you know, Los Alamos is there. You could drive through and see some other things besides that on the way. So, Commissioner
Well,
Rourke?
I was just going to say, when you're talking about the enormity of Windset Farms, you know, you just try and imagine 1 million or 2 million feet of glass that you're walking around in. It's totally amazing.
You know, my suggestion would be that we get together, Commissioner Welt, myself, and staff, and come up with some suggestions, put it on the next agenda, and kind of throw it about the commission, see how we want to show off Santa Barbara County. And in the interim, before we meet, if you got suggestions, then give them to our director
And-
Hood, and you know, have it for the meeting, and then we can you know, come up with some ideas and recommendations, and hopefully a theme.
Okay, and actually another suggestion I had, which is something in the middle, and I know for sure is in my district, is Terravant in Buellton, where they're doing all of the winemaking and the bottling for a lot of the small, and you can actually see it. So Well, people will find that on their own, so I don't know if we
Madam
need to
Chair?
make a tour. Yes, Commissioner
The City
Richardson.
of Solvang's Visitors Bureau and the county's Visitors Bureau are absolute good resources for visitors' activities.
Yes.
I think that if you want them to contact you, I can arrange that.
Yeah, one of the suggestions I had thrown out there is that we do make contact with all of the Chamber of Commerces throughout the whole region and bring them into the mix. And in fact, that night that we have the tasting, that it could be something almost organized by each chamber, and get their local flavor, what they have, and be part of it.
The chambers are trying to organize themselves into a regional chamber also, encompassing all the chambers in the county.
Yeah, well, there's a Tri-County one too. Yeah.
I was mulling over in my mind a few words that described in my mind the county. And words like agriculture, wine, Danes,
Abel Skeever.
cowboys, cattle, horses, agriculture, casinos, those sorts of things could be just as mulling over ideas, as you're considering themes and those sorts of things.
Okay, Commissioner Welt, you still have your light on?
Well,
Other
yes, I
comments?
do. Another couple of random ideas. You have Vandenberg Air Force Base in our backyard, which is absolutely a huge asset. And then you have a huge federal penitentiary that's sitting out there all by itself,
Do
too.
do you think we could arrange a missile launch?
Madam
I'll
Chair?
miss some
Yes,
people.
yes, Commissioner Lavanino.
I think these are all good things that you can put in. Obviously, there's an information packet or something for as people show up, I would imagine, or some facts about the place. But we got to come up with something that's 4 or 5, berries to the beaches, or something gets people realizing what we do here in like 4 or 5 words. So you guys are going to have fun. But yeah, I don't think we could. It's hard to include everything. What's that? Orchards to Oceans. I like that one too.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. Commissioner Aceves?
Just a question, how much time are we talking about on these sessions? Because if you're going to drive all the way to Santa Maria and back, you're going to spend most of the time on the road. Whereas, that's my first question. The second thing is, maybe we bring them all into Santa Barbara and let them show themselves off. I don't know.
So,
But how much time do we have devoted to these sessions?
Well, so all great ideas, great questions. A couple of comments, and I'll start by answering your question. The mobile workshop is traditionally held on Wednesday morning. It is the annual conference itself actually kicks off around 1-ish. The mobile workshop is typically 4 to 5 hours. The goal is to have people back 1 hour before the conference kicks off. So it's probably about 4 or 5 hours on a bus, going to multiple stops, or however many stops you can reasonably fit into that time frame. The day before the conference on Tuesday, some hosts have offered pre-con activities that are not supported by LAFCO. So it would be something that would be planned and executed by you as the host, that typically have not cost the participant any money. And those things range from biking to hiking to other kinds of walking tours, that kind of thing. So plenty of opportunity to do some of the things that I hear you talking about. And in terms of the theme, I heard a lot of, very interesting, creative ideas, and would support the remarks here that we want to keep a theme short and somehow connected to LAFCO. One of the biggest pieces of feedback we get every single year in terms of not so much the theme but the sessions themselves is making sure there's a connection back to the work of LAFCO. So a way to highlight the diversity and all that Santa Barbara has to offer as it's connected to the work that you do. And I'm very happy to help you out in any way that we can.
All right. So, Mr. Hood, have we
I think that was great.
have we satisfied this item?
Yes, I think so. That was great. And also, I just wanted to mention that there's a Cal LAFCO Conference Planning Committee meeting next Tuesday, December 15th, and so Commissioner Welt and Morehouse and myself will be part of that.
Whatever Tuesday's
It's
date
Tuesday,
is,
15th.
15th is a Tuesday.
10 o'clock.
It's
It's
a
by phone.
conference call. Yeah.
All right, thank you very much. I think we've concluded this item. We will also consider this received and filed.
Right.
And now we'll move on to information item number 3, which is the LAFCO Legislative Committee meeting report.
Madam Chair, we'll keep Pamela Miller up at the podium, but I know she's anxious to leave fairly soon because the next LAFCO Legislative Committee meeting is in Sacramento at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. So she'll be from here driving back to Sacramento. But I did tell you and give you a copy of the agenda from the November 6th meeting, but there's also an agenda that's available on the LAFCO website for tomorrow's meeting. And I would ask Pamela to talk a little bit about the legislative items that are proposed during this session, this year, second year of the 2-year session, and one of which is the 2016 Omnibus Bill and items that are going to be included in that, and then any potential legislation that has LAFCO legislation issues attached to it. So I'll just ask Pamela to comment.
Thank you. So this year, 2015, actually ended up being a huge year for legislation that impacts LAFCOs. We were not actually expecting the kind of legislation that came up and took an exorbitant amount of time. And so we're going into next year with the presumption that next year will be no different, because I'm actually seeing a trend. There is an interest in either at the legislative level of either involving LAFCO in unique and creative ways in processes, or completely bypassing LAFCO. So neither one of those particularly work for us. So we're anticipating that next year will be no different. And so the board is strongly encouraging the legislative committee to move into next year with a very narrow platform. For the past couple of years, the board has declared their priorities as dealing with cleaning up the disincorporation statutes, which we actually accomplished this year, as well as strengthening the relationship between LAFCOs and JPAs and revising protest provisions. Those 2 items were tabled this year so that LAFCO could focus on the massive work of the disincorporation statutes and the annual omnibus bill. We've already had the discussion about the limitations of us from a legislative perspective. So really, sponsoring 2 bills is like the ultimate maximum for us. So going into 2017, the board had to make a decision around its priorities that included a policy cleanup bill to SB 88, which I mentioned earlier is the budget trailer bill that passed that gave the Water Board this unprecedented authority to consolidate water systems. The relationship between JPAs and LAFCOs, protest provisions, and an item that fell off the omnibus bill that is pretty important, and it fell off because it was controversial. And the nature of an omnibus bill is that it must be minor, technical, non-substantive, non-controversial items that basically small cleanup to CKH. So after long deliberation, not only by the legislative committee who made recommendations to the board, but then the board had long deliberations last month and are now coming back to the legislative committee for them to consider tomorrow, their recommendation of focusing on sponsoring 2 pieces of legislation next year. One is the annual omnibus bill, which we have a tendency to put everything but the kitchen sink in, and so we are limiting it to 5 items this year only, as well as 2 just minor typos. It will be up to the committee. I think we have 11 or 12 items that have been submitted from LAFCOs around the state for consideration for inclusion in the omnibus bill, and it'll be up to the committee to prioritize those for inclusion this year. The other item that they want us to focus on in 2016 is strengthening the relationship between JPAs and LAFCOs, and so we will be looking at sponsoring a bill that will ask JPAs, when they file a copy of their agreement with the Secretary of State, that they also file a copy of that agreement with the LAFCO in the jurisdiction in which they are doing business, if a member of that JPA is a local agency. The other major priority that they have declared as a legislative priority is the protest provisions. We just don't have room on the plate again this year. So they have asked that we table that for till 2017. And they took off the table completely a change to Code Section 56653, which is what fell off of the omnibus bill this year. We have decided that we will not sponsor a legislative cleanup bill to SB 88. However, Senator Wolk is going to be using SB 552 as the vehicle to do that. And we will be taking an active role in working with Senator Wolk and the other stakeholders in that policy cleanup bill. And hopefully there's some room in there to respond to, in a reactive way, unexpected legislation that'll impact LAFCOs. So.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Commissioner Wolf.
I appreciate Pamela's summary of everything that's going on, but what it did for me is it helped me maybe formulate a something for our conference, because you mentioned that legislation is going to be a big part of what we're going to be doing next year. So here's my thought for a theme, and that is building a platform, ... stability with meaningful change. There you have my suggestion.
An oil platform.
You could probably even get lights on the big one.
I woke him up, yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner Wolf. Other comments from you or Commissioner Guyer?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, thank you. All right. Anything else on this item? All right. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Miller. Have a safe trip back to Sacramento. Thank you again for being here with us for these items. We will also consider that received and filed. And now we'll go on to item number 4, which is the report on the Santa Rita Hills Community Services District dissolution. This is also just informational.
It's just informational, Madam Chair, but I've outlined for you the next steps. Your commission did adopt a resolution on November 5th to initiate dissolution proceedings for the Santa Rita Hills Community Services District. And just for the commission's information, there are various government code sections from the Cortese-Knox-Hertzberg Act that talk about timelines for this. The most critical timeline is the protest hearing, and that has been set for January 14th, 2016. I have secured the City of Lompoc's City Council chambers at 11 o'clock. We have published notice and sent notices out to all of the property owners, because this is an uninhabited, what they call an uninhabited dissolution, because there are less than 12 registered voters, as we well know. So I will convene the protest hearing as your executive officer, accept any written protests that could be filed at the hearing, filed before the hearing with us. And I included a protest form that can be filled out and submitted, so we will evaluate the protests that are filed. And just so you know, in excess of 50% protest would terminate the dissolution, but it's part of the process, and so that's what we're doing at this point. Happy to answer any questions, but that concludes my comments.
All right, thank you. Any questions on this item? Commissioner Seves?
Protest from whom, and how we count?
The landowners.
Okay.
All right. Any other questions on that? All right. Received and filed. And now the report on current LAFCO applications, which is informational item number 5.
Madam Chair, I think this explains itself. We have a couple of pending applications. The reorganization of the Santa Rita Hills CSD and formation of the Bridge and Highway District is pretty much on hold. Natural history annexation to the city of Santa Barbara History Museum needs to have a property tax exchange negotiation take place, even though it's owned by a 501c3 and pays minimal, if any, property taxes to the county and the city. It still needs to have a zero exchange resolution adopted by both. And so we're waiting on that. And then the new Key Site 20 is an application that was filed by the Board of Supervisors to annex to County Service Area 5 in the North County Lighting District for development in the Orchid area.
Well, thank you. Go ahead, Commissioner
Mr. Hood,
Seves.
on the Santa Barbara issue, it's obvious, but obviously, could you make sure that when it comes to us, we're in Santa Barbara?
Yes.
Okay.
And, you know, I just have to say, I don't see that yet on the board's long-range calendar, so I'm assuming it's going to be, you know, a couple of months.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I've been trying to move it along because, as you know, there's significant interest in that from adjacent property owners.
Okay, any other questions or comments on these? All right. Received and filed. Now we're to Commissioner and staff announcements. Do we have any Commissioner announcements at this time? Any?
I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Morehouse?
Is it possible on our, we have a meeting scheduled for February 4th, and obviously we don't know what our calendar is going to look like at that point. But given the IV issue going on, is it possible we may have a special meeting instead of the February 4th meeting to accommodate the calendar, you know, the 150-day schedule, to get it moving along?
Well, I don't think at this point, Commissioner Morehouse, that that's necessary, but I think we have, as soon as the application is submitted, then we have 150 days, and that could be within the next couple of weeks. But the key deadline, of course, is the election deadline, which is in July, to make the November general election. So if we need to have a special meeting, we can do that, but I think that it would be later rather than the February meeting if we need, you know, start to run out of time, or if there's some issues that come up that we don't know about.
Yeah, the commission always has the ability to set a special meeting. Commissioner Levanino?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question budget-wise about us attending. I've never attended a Cal-LAFCO conference before, and I know generally 3 or 4, maybe 5 attend. The fact that it's going to be in Santa Barbara, I think most of us are thinking we're going to attend. How are we looking? Are we preparing for that, or should we prepare for that?
I think that we're pretty well set because there won't be, as far as I know, any overnight accommodations unless the commissioners really want to stay. You know, that's certainly up to you.
Okay.
And if that's the case, I'm looking at you now, and you may. But, you know, we would pay registration clearly for the whole conference for any commissioner who wants to stay. And
I'll volunteer my man cave for any North County
There you go.
commissioner that needs to stay overnight.
I think we can stay in Steve's office.
Sure.
Shower in there?
Better than the man cave.
Commissioner Seves?
Thank you. I'm getting back to the IV. The clock doesn't start until the completed application and fees are submitted.
that's correct.
Okay, would you let us know when that happens?
Sure.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other comments from commissioners, questions? Yes, Commissioner Orick? We
Merry
still.
Christmas. Let me forget that.
Well,
Jacqueline's
well,
giving me a
just-
wink, and I'm going, what am I forgetting to do?
I just want to give Mr. Hood an opportunity to make some comments here at the end before we close.
Yeah, I do, and I'll be brief because I know that we've kind of gone on a little longer than usual, but we do have some terms expiring. Special district members, John Fox and Craig Geyer's terms expire on March 1st. And so I've given notice of a special district selection committee meeting that would be held on the 25th of January in the Marriott in Buellton. Nomination period goes through January 15th, and notices have been sent out. There is also an item that was informed, that I was informed of, has to do with redevelopment agencies, SB 107, that talks about RDA Oversight Board for the 37 counties that have redevelopment agencies that would be combining the oversight boards into one board. And so that's something that CSDA and LAFCO are working on as far as extending that deadline from, it was from July 1st, 2016, July 1st, 2018. So I'll send you information on that, but it's something that's kind of interesting that we didn't know about until fairly recently.
Okay, I think that would be good. It would be really good, make sure our CEO's office knows about that through the legislative committee, so we can take a look at that, because I know in the county we had any number of, RDAs with each individual membership oversight boards, so.
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting issue that just came up. Also, the California Groundwater Management Agency legislation that provides that we develop what they call California Groundwater Management Agencies in a plan. Now, I know that the county board talked about that a couple of weeks ago on October 17th about doing the county, Santa Barbara County Water Agency, developing some plans for the groundwater agencies, Kiama. But there's also been discussions by a group representing some of the large landowners in the Kiama Valley about forming a California water district to do the same thing. So I want to make sure that that LAFCO coordinates with the county as far as that process. We are just.
One that needs to be in place by 2017?
Yeah, June 30th, 2017. Right.
My understanding is that that's more regional and not countywide.
That's correct. It covers the groundwater basins, and there's basically two, the
Well,
Kiama.
actually, there's three
San
that were
Antonio.
designated, yeah.
Okay.
Kiama, San Antonio, which is Los Alamos, and San Ynez
San Ynez,
Valley.
okay.
Mhm. All right.
Two more quick things. We are in the final stages of the audit, the annual audit with Bartlett, Pringle, and Wolf, and we're finishing that up. Should be available in January for our January meeting. And I have started the MSR SOI updates for the cities, and started that a couple of months ago. And I've heard from 5 of the 7 cities, met with Goleta yesterday. And 4 of the 5 I talked to just want to reaffirm their existing SOIs. Goleta has some other issues that may or may not come up at this round, but maybe coming up in the future. And I will be contacting Santa Barbara, Santa Maria, and Carpinteria that I haven't heard from yet. But I can present those probably to you in January for the 4 that want to just be reaffirmed for spheres. And then I'm working on the districts. Start out with the larger districts and then work down to the cemetery districts and some other agencies, but that's it for me.
Okay, very good. Anything else before we close? All right, well, again, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays to everybody, and have a great New Year, and we'll see you next Thursday, January 7th in Santa Barbara.